Did God actually want Israel to have a king? Because if you read 1 Samuel closely, the answer feels a little complicated. On one hand, kings are clearly part of God's story. But on the other hand, when Israel asks for a king, God sounds heartbroken. And that tension tells us something important about how God works with people. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, the people come to the prophet Samuel and they say, "Give us a king like all the other nations." And God tells Samuel something a little shocking. He says, "They haven't rejected you, they've rejected me as their king." The issue isn't leadership structure, it boils down to identity. Because Israel wasn't supposed to be like everybody else. They were meant to live differently, trusting God as their ruler instead of copying surrounding nations. So when they ask for a king, it feels less like progress and more like peer pressure. And then there's the prophet Samuel, and he hates the idea. God has to tell Samuel multiple times to listen to the people and give them what they're asking for. Samuel seems upset because he understands what this request means. God's people are trading trust for control. They want something visible and predictable and right in front of their faces. It's actually pretty interesting to look at the way 1 Samuel is structured because there are positive stories about kingship, but they're surrounded by these warnings. It's like the book keeps saying, yes, a king can work, but this started for the wrong reasons. God allows this monarchy, but the narrative keeps reminding that it came from imitation and not faith, which raises a bigger biblical pattern. Sometimes God lets people choose things that he didn't originally intend, and then he works redemption through it anyway. None of this surprised God, obviously. Way back in Genesis, God tells Abraham that kings will come from his line. And in Deuteronomy, laws are already written for what a king should do and how a king should act, almost like a safety manuals for something risky. The tone is not, you must have a king. It's more like, if you choose this path, here's some guardrails. God isn't endorsing this idea so much as preparing for human stubbornness. Israel asks for a king, and then they get Saul, a king who looks perfect on the outside but fails. And then God raises up David next, a king who's very flawed but chosen. And suddenly what started as rejection of God becomes a pathway towards redemption. The monarchy itself becomes something bigger because eventually, centuries later, another king shows up, not riding a war horse, but a donkey, not demanding power, but dismissing crowds. That's Jesus, by the way, in case you missed it. So, did God want Israel to have a king? Maybe not in the way they were asking for, but God does something that he seems to do a lot in Scripture. He takes human failure, human fear, human bad decisions, and he bends it towards redemption.